My stepdaughter said, "Sign it or you'll never see the baby." Big mistake. You ever walk into a room and know before anyone even opens their mouth? You're the topic of conversation. Not in the good way either. That was me walking into the Willow Creek Community Church Fellowship Hall on a Thursday afternoon. I'd been invited. Well, invited is generous. Pastor Jim called and said it would be nice if I came to the Rotary Club luncheon since everyone's going to be there. Which in a small town like ours is code for, if you don't show up, folks will notice. The place smelled like green beans cooked to death, instant mashed potatoes, and that burnt coffee scent you can only get from a 30-year-old percolator. The same urn we'd been using since I was a teenager sat in the corner, dented and missing its lid handle. I spotted Vanessa right away, my late husband's daughter. She was standing by the dessert table all dolled up like she was hosting a TV morning show. And glued to her side, as always lately, was Trent Caldwell, her fiancé. Trent's the kind of man who treats every handshake like a power move and calls every stranger buddy, even when he can't remember their name. They saw me the second I stepped in. Vanessa gave me this big, toothy smile, but her eyes, well, they told the real story. And Trent? He just smirked, leaned down to whisper something in her ear, and the two of them chuckled like they were sharing a private joke. I grabbed a cup of coffee and found a seat near the end of one of the long, folding tables. I figured I could keep my head down, eat, and leave before anyone had a chance to corner me. But small towns don't work like that. Pastor Jim shuffled over with his plate and sat across from me. He's a good man, but about as subtle as a marching band. He leaned in, lowered his voice like he was sharing some big secret, and said, "Rachel, I hear you might be ready to step back from the store." That true. The store, Porter's Hardware. My late husband Dale started that place from scratch. I remember the day we opened just 2 aisles of nails and screws, a rack of hammers, and a cash register older than we were. Over the years, we built it up to a full hardware store. It's where we raised our kids, well, his daughter and the son we had together, and it's where I've been every day since Dale passed. I smiled at Pastor Jim and said, "Not that I'm aware of." He nodded, but before I could even sip my coffee, Trent's voice boomed from 3 seats down. "Oh, we'll convince her. She's worked hard enough. Time for her to let the next generation modernize things." The room chuckled politely, but I felt every eye turn to me. The next generation, huh? Like I was a placeholder just keeping the lights on until they decided to take over. I kept my face neutral, but inside, that one stung. See, I've been running Porter's Hardware by myself for 7 years now. I've survived slow winters, late deliveries, and more than one summer where the air conditioning went out. I've never missed payroll, never let a supplier go unpaid. And now, here's my stepdaughter's fiancé making it sound like I'm some tired old woman ready to be put out to pasture. I didn't respond. My mama always told me, don't start a fire just to prove you can put it out. So I finished my coffee and let the conversation drift to fishing tournaments and high school football. But I didn't forget, because here's the thing, they weren't just talking about modernizing. I'd heard bits and pieces for months. Little slip-ups from Vanessa, questions Trent would ask about the store's property lines, curious visits from folks I barely knew who suddenly wanted to know how business was going. It wasn't random, and I had a pretty good idea why. Porter's Hardware isn't just a store. It sits on 2 acres right on Main Street. In Willow Creek, that's prime real estate. Developers have been eyeing our block for years, and if Trent thought he could sweet-talk Vanessa into convincing me to hand it over, well, he had another thing coming. But here's what neither of them knew. Around my neck, under my blouse, I wear an old brass key. It's not pretty. Just an ordinary-looking thing, worn smooth from years of being handled. My husband gave it to me the week before he died. He pressed it into my palm like it was a sacred object and said, "Someday you'll know exactly what this opens, and you'll be glad you never let go of it." I didn't ask questions. That wasn't our way. Dale was a man who planned ahead, and if he said I'd need it, I trusted him. For 7 years, it just sat there on my chain. I'd touch it sometimes without thinking, like a habit. That afternoon, as I sat there in the church hall with Trent's smug laugh echoing in my ears, I reached up and felt it against my skin. And something in me shifted. I'd been letting little comments slide, letting Vanessa's just trying to help phone calls roll off my back, telling myself they were family and family deserves patience. But right then, I decided something. I wasn't going to be pushed out of my own life's work. Not by Trent. Not by anyone. They thought I was an easy mark. A woman who'd worked herself to exhaustion and would be grateful to pass the torch. What they didn't know was that I'd been paying attention. That key wasn't just a piece of brass, it was a promise. And if Dale had taught me anything, it was that promises are worth protecting. That day, I walked out of the church hall past the dessert table and the fake smiles with a quiet kind of fire in my chest. They thought they knew how this story would end. They had no idea who they were dealing with. You'd think after that Rotary luncheon, Trent and Vanessa would cool it a little. But if anything, they just got bolder. I guess in their minds, that lunch was a soft launch of their plan. You know, test the waters. See who in town would nod along to the idea of me stepping back from the store. Turns out more folks than I expected were willing to nod. That stung more than I care to admit. A week later, Trent started showing up at Porter's Hardware under the pretense of helping. If you've ever watched someone pretend to help while actually getting in the way, you know the kind of help I'm talking about. He'd stand in the middle of the aisle with his hands on his hips, surveying the place like he was appraising it. You know, Rachel, he'd say if we just knocked out that front counter and replaced these old pegboard displays with open shelving, we could double the space for high-margin items. High-margin items. I'd bet my next paycheck he learned that phrase from some business podcast he listens to on 1.5 speed while driving his truck. I'd just smile, nod, and go back to what I was doing. But I started paying attention, not to what he wanted me to see, but to the questions he asked when he thought I wasn't listening. Like the time he cornered our delivery driver, asking about the square footage of the storage room. Or when I overheard him asking one of my longtime customers, wouldn't this be a great location for a boutique cafe? It didn't take long to connect the dots. This wasn't about helping or modernizing. This was about getting control of prime Main Street property. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized if Trent really wanted this, Vanessa was going to help him get it. That's when I started my notebook. I bought it at the dollar store, nothing fancy, just a cheap spiral with a red cover. I kept it in my purse at all times. And every time something happened, a comment, a visit, a phone call, I wrote it down. Date time, who was there, exactly what was said. Dale always told me if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Meanwhile, Vanessa was calling more often always in that sing-song voice she used when she wanted something. Rachel, we're just trying to help you relax. Wouldn't it be nice not to worry about payroll or inventory anymore? I'd mumble something about thinking it over and hang up. But in the evenings, after I locked up the store, I'd go upstairs to the little office we'd barely touched since Dale died. The kind of office with a desk older than me, mismatched file cabinets, and a thin layer of dust on the blinds. That's where the brass key came back into play. I'd worn it for years without ever using it. But that night, I finally slid it into the lock of the old fireproof safe hidden behind a filing cabinet. The tumblers clicked, and the door opened with a heavy groan. Inside, well, I don't know what I expected, but I found more than I bargained for. Every deed for the store. Every tax return going back 20 years. Insurance papers. And tucked neatly in a manila folder, another deed. It was for the vacant lot directly behind the store. Paid in full. Bought by Dale 15 years ago. I just sat there staring at it. That lot made our property worth at least double. And now I knew why Dale had looked so serious when he gave me that key. I locked it all back up, but I didn't just walk away. I started making copies, one set for me, one for someone I trusted completely. My godson, Noah Carter. He's an attorney over in Dayton sharp as a tack and with zero patience for people who think they can push around someone he cares about. I didn't tell Noah the whole story yet. Just said I wanted the papers safe in case something happened to me. Around that time, small town gossip started trickling in. One evening, just before closing, Sheriff Miller came by for a box of screws. He leaned on the counter, gave me that look that says I probably shouldn't be telling you this, and said, "Rachel, Trent's been asking around, wanted to know if you've been having any memory trouble." I didn't flinch, just rang up his screws and thanked him. But the minute he walked out, my stomach turned cold. This wasn't just about convincing me to sell. They were laying the groundwork to make me look incompetent, maybe even legally unfit to manage my own affairs. I'd seen it happen to other folks in town. Someone's nephew decides Aunt Mary can't handle her farm anymore, so suddenly people start noticing her forgetting things that never actually happened. Before you know it, the papers are signed and the farm's gone. Well, not me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook open, flipping through the pages I'd filled. Every little jab, every backhanded offer to help, every strange question about the property. And for the first time since Dale died, I didn't just feel like I was keeping the store running. I felt like I was protecting something bigger. I called Noah. It was time to stop playing defense. "Rachel," he said, after I explained enough for him to get the picture, "if they're setting you up, you have to act before they do, not after." So we started a plan. Quietly, methodically. I didn't tell Vanessa. I didn't confront Trent. I just let them think I was still the polite, obliging stepmother they could nudge into signing whatever they put in front of me. And all the while, I was making sure that no matter what they pulled, I'd be the one holding the only ending that mattered. Because if Trent Caldwell thought I was going to just hand him my life's work, he was in for a real education. I knew they'd make their move sooner or later. I just didn't know when. The answer came on a Monday afternoon when Vanessa called with a voice as sweet as honey to say she and Trent wanted to take me out to dinner. "We need a fresh start, Rachel," she said. "Just one dinner to clear the air." I could hear Trent's voice faintly in the background, as if he wanted me to know he was there. I said yes. Not because I believed the invitation, but because sometimes the fastest way to see through a scheme is to walk straight into it. They chose the Willow Creek Inn, the fanciest place within 30 miles. White tablecloths, crystal wine glasses, the soft sound of a piano in the corner. The kind of place where people speak in low voices and glance at each other through candlelight. I wore my navy dress, Dale's watch, and the brass key around my neck, the one I'd never taken off in years. When I arrived, Vanessa was already seated, her hair perfectly curled, dress crisp without a wrinkle, smile polite, but eyes cold. She stood to give me a quick hug. "You look wonderful," she said. I returned the compliment and sat down. "Trent will be here in just a minute," she added. But when the door opened, Trent didn't walk in alone. 2 men in dark suits followed him, briefcases in hand-eyes scanning the table like they already knew the script. Trent pulled out his chair, sat down, and gave me that salesman's grin. "Rachel, these are my colleagues. They're here to make things easier for us." One of them placed a leather folder on the table, opened it, and turned it toward me. "If you could just sign here and here," he said, tapping the pages with a pen, "we can wrap everything up tonight." I didn't touch the papers. "What exactly am I signing?" I asked, keeping my gaze steady. "Power of attorney," Trent said smoothly. "So we can help manage the store and your other assets. Save you the stress. You've worked so hard for so many years." I kept my voice calm. "I'm not sick. I'm not incompetent. I'm not in debt. Why would I need someone to manage my affairs?" Vanessa stayed silent, eyes locked on her wine glass. Trent leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were sharing a secret. "Rachel, you're almost 60. These things get complicated. This is just smart planning. And if I don't sign, I asked." That's when Vanessa finally looked up. Her eyes were stripped of any pretense. "Then we can't guarantee you'll be part of certain family events. Like when the baby is born." There it was, the blow. A threat plain and unvarnished. I let the silence stretch long enough to see Trent's smile start to twitch. Then I reached into my purse. They probably thought I was reaching for a pen or my glasses. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed Noah. Noah, I'm at the Willow Creek Inn. Can you stop by, bring the envelope we discussed? I hung up before they could ask anything else. The air at the table grew heavier. One of the lawyers began checking his watch. Trent ordered a stiff drink. Vanessa swirled her white wine. 15 minutes later, Noah walked in, tall, steady, and impossible to intimidate. He shook my hand, Aunt Rachel, then looked at the 3 men at the table. Gentlemen, he placed a thick envelope on the table and slid it toward me. I rested my hand on it, didn't open it. Trent gave a tight laugh. What's this supposed to be? This, I said, is why I'm not signing anything tonight. I looked directly at the lawyers. 2 weeks ago, I transferred every asset I owned, the store, the building, the lot behind it, my savings into an irrevocable trust. Noah is the trustee. Its legal can't be undone without a court order, and no one here besides Noah has any authority over it. The color drained from Trent's face. Rachel, you can't just, Vanessa began. I can, and I already have. Around us, I felt the shift in the room. This was no longer a private conversation. People were watching. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Mrs. Porter, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, I cut in. If you thought this was private, you wouldn't have brought hired help to ambush me in the middle of dinner. Trent crossed his arms, his tone sharpening. So you're just going to lock everything away out of spite. Not spite, I said. Protection. That trust is for family, the real kind, the ones who don't use threats as bargaining chips. Vanessa blinked. I could see her calculating whether there was still a way to spin this in her favor. But the moment was gone. The plan had failed, and everyone in the room knew it. Noah stood buttoning his jacket. We're done here. I gathered my purse and coat slowly, then looked at Vanessa one last time. When you're ready to have a real conversation, no lawyers, no ultimatums, you know where to find me. Then I walked out. Outside, the early autumn air felt crisp, like it was washing away months of tension. I heard Noah's steady footsteps behind me. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Better than okay. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for the next hit. I wasn't on the defensive anymore. And if Trent Caldwell thought he could outplay me, he'd just learned the most important lesson of his life. Never underestimate the woman who holds the key. News doesn't take long to travel in Willow Creek. By the time I unlocked the hardware store the next morning, 3 people had already come in just to browse, but somehow knew about the scene at the inn. Nobody said it outright, of course. Small-town gossip is an art form, questions disguised as compliments, sympathy wrapped in curiosity. Heard you were looking sharp last night, Rachel, Mr. Whitaker said, leaning on the counter like he had all day. Guess you told him. I just smiled and rang up his paint thinner. Let folks fill in their own details. The truth had a way of settling exactly where it needed to. By Friday, it was clear the ripples were hitting Trent harder than he'd expected. One of the developers from Columbus, the same ones he'd been cozying up to, suddenly postponed a meeting. A customer who's also a bank manager stopped in for a box of nails and mentioned in that casual way that's not casual at all that certain loan officers had heard rumors about integrity concerns in his business dealings. I didn't spread those rumors, but I wasn't about to correct them either. Vanessa didn't call. Not once. I figured she was licking her wounds or trying to reframe the story so she didn't look like the villain. But in a town like ours, people can read between the lines. When someone's been coming around all smiles and then disappears overnight, folks remember. The store felt different after that night at the inn. Not empty lighter, like I could breathe in my own building again. I'd spent months bracing for a fight in every conversation, wondering which question was innocent and which was the start of another maneuver. Now I could focus on customers, on orders, on the smell of fresh lumber when a shipment came in. 2 weeks later, I made my own quiet change. Hired a part-timer, a young single mom named Jamie, who'd been trying to find work that fit around her kid's school schedule. She knew her way around tools better than most men who came in, and customers took to her right away. Training her wasn't just about freeing up my time. It was about making sure the store had another set of loyal eyes and hands. I didn't announce it, but word still got around. Rachel's getting help at the store was something people could twist whichever way they wanted. Let them. The truth was, I was building strength in the places that mattered. One afternoon, as I was restocking bolts, Sheriff Miller stopped by again. He leaned on the counter, voice low. Trent came by the station last week, wanted to know if there were any complaints against you. I told him straight. Only complaint I've heard is that she runs too tight a ship for some folks. He didn't like that answer. I thanked him, and I meant it. Having someone shut down Trent's fishing expedition before it could start was worth more than he knew. I didn't see Trent again in person, but his shadow was still out there. Little signs. A conversation that went quiet when I walked into the diner. A neighbor mentioning that Vanessa had been under a lot of stress, but no direct contact, no calls. Noah checked in regularly. We met once a week at the back table of the cafe, going over any mail or messages related to the trust. Most of it was nothing, but once there was a letter, Vanessa's handwriting on the envelope. I didn't open it, handed it to Noah instead. If it's about money or property, deal with it. If it's personal, you decide if I should see it. He nodded. A week later, he told me it was a mix of both, an apology wrapped around practical suggestions about how to make the arrangement more flexible. I told him to file it. In October, the leaves turned copper and gold, and the store got busy with people prepping for winter. It was the first season in years where I wasn't secretly wondering if I'd still own the place by spring. One evening, after closing, I went upstairs to the office, pulled open the bottom drawer of Dale's old desk, and took out the brass key. I held it for a long time before setting it in a small velvet box. The safe didn't just hold deeds and papers anymore. It held the proof that I could stand my ground and win. That Friday, I asked Noah to meet me at the store. When he came in, I handed him the box. This is yours now. Doesn't mean you use it, just means you know where it is. He understood without me having to explain. That key wasn't just metal. It was legacy insurance and a promise all in one. Meanwhile, Trent's presence in town got quieter. His truck was seen less and less. His name came up more in past tense. One of his side projects fell through, and I heard from Janet at the post office that he'd been in to change his forwarding address. Not out of state, not yet, but far enough that he wouldn't just happen to drop by anymore. Vanessa was trickier. She stayed in town, still showed up to church now, and then still smiled for people who didn't know better. But I noticed the difference. No more casual stops at the store. No more just thought I'd check in. And when our paths crossed in public, she'd keep the conversation short. The distance was her choice, but I wasn't going to chase her. In November, I hosted a small customer appreciation day at the store. Nothing big, coffee, donuts, 10% off everything. People came, lingered, told stories about Dale. For the first time in a long while, I enjoyed being in the middle of it. No tension, no undercurrent of suspicion. Just community. Late that afternoon, Jamie caught me in the back room. You know, Rachel, when I first started here, people told me you were hard. She grinned. Now I just think you're careful. There's a difference. That stayed with me. Careful had saved the store. Careful had kept me standing when other people wanted me on my knees. By December, winter had settled in, and with it came a peace I hadn't expected. I wasn't naive. I knew Vanessa could try again someday. But I also knew she'd think twice, maybe 3 times, before making another move. She'd have to. I'd made sure of it. On New Year's Eve, I closed the store early and walked home through the square. The Christmas lights were still up, glowing against the snow. I stopped outside the window, looked in at the shelves stocked neat and full, the counter polished, the old clock Dale hung, still ticking away. It was mine, still mine. not because someone gave it to me, but because I refused to let anyone take it. That night, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, I thought about everything that had happened since the summer. The setup at the inn, the trust, the way the town had shifted once the truth started leaking out. I thought about Jamie's words, careful not hard, and realized she was right. Rebuilding isn't always about adding new things. Sometimes it's about protecting what's worth keeping, weeding out what doesn't belong, and making sure the roots are strong enough to weather whatever storm comes next. And as I sat there, the brass key now in Noah's keeping, I understood something else I'd won more than just a fight for my store. I'd won back my space, my quiet, and my right to decide who gets close enough to touch what matters. That was worth more than anything Trent or Vanessa ever thought they could take from me. By the time spring rolled back around, the ice on Main Street had melted. The storefront planters were full of tulips again, and life in Willow Creek had settled into a new rhythm. The store was steady, the regulars kept coming, and Jamie had gone from part-timer to someone I could trust with the keys when I needed a day off. I wasn't just running Porter's Hardware anymore. I was running it on my own terms. It's funny how a year can change the way you see your place in the world. 12 months earlier, I'd been playing defense in my own life, bracing for the next call, the next visit, the next maneuver from people who claimed they were family. Now the phone could ring, the door could swing open, and I didn't have to wonder if there was a hook hidden behind the smile. I knew exactly where my boundaries were, and more importantly, I knew how to keep them. One morning in April, Noah stopped by with a cup of coffee and a stack of envelopes. "These came to my office for you," he said. Most were routine bank statements, invoices, but one caught my eye. The return address was the Willow Creek Community College. I opened it and found a letter from the small business program director. They were inviting me to speak at their end-of-semester seminar for students thinking about starting their own businesses. The topic they suggested, protecting what you build. I laughed when I read it. "Guess I've got a reputation now," I told Noah. He grinned. "A good one." The day of the seminar, I stood at the front of a classroom full of 20-somethings, all of them with bright eyes and big ideas. Some wanted to open cafes, some talked about online businesses, a few dreamed of family shops like mine. I told them the truth, the kind that doesn't make it into glossy brochures. How you can love people and still have to protect yourself from them. How you need paperwork as much as passion. How the biggest threats sometimes come wearing a smile and offering to help. They asked questions, took notes. A few came up afterward to thank me. One young woman said, "My aunt lost her bakery because she trusted the wrong person. I wish she'd heard you before it happened. That stayed with me all the way home." A couple weeks later, I was back at the store sorting a shipment of garden tools when Janet came in. She'd been my quiet ally through all of this, the kind of friend who doesn't need to be in the spotlight, but will always be in your corner. "You've got a visitor," she said with a look I couldn't quite read. I stepped out from behind the counter, and there was Vanessa. She looked different. Not softer exactly, but less certain. She held a diaper bag over one shoulder, and in her arms, a baby girl with dark hair and big eyes. "This is Emma," she said quietly. "She's 6 months old now." For a moment, we just stood there. I wanted to reach out, but I kept my hands at my sides. Vanessa cleared her throat. "I know you don't want to talk about everything. I just thought you should meet her." It wasn't an apology. Not even close. But it was a step. I nodded toward a bench by the window. "We can sit for a minute." We talked about feeding schedules and teething safe topics. She didn't bring up the store, the trust, or the past. When she left, she said, "Maybe we can try again sometime." I told her that would depend on how we both decided to show up. After she walked out, Janet came over. "You okay?" she asked. I was, because I knew that visit didn't change the terms I'd set. Meeting the baby didn't erase what happened, but it didn't have to. Some doors can stay open just a crack, and that's enough. That summer, I joined a small group at the community center for business owners over 50. It wasn't formal, just coffee, donuts, and a round table where we shared experiences. More than once my story came up, and every time someone would say, "That happened to me too," or "I wish I'd been ready for it." The more I talked, the more I realized my fight wasn't just about keeping my store. It was about showing people, especially women, that protecting what you've built isn't selfish. It's smart. By fall, the group asked if I'd be willing to help set up a workshop on legal basics for small business owners. I said yes. We covered everything from leases to trusts to spotting red flags in partnerships. Noah volunteered an evening to walk folks through the legal side, and Jamie handled the refreshments. It wasn't fancy, but the turnout surprised us. People from 3 towns over came to listen. One man approached me afterward and said, "You saved me from signing something I didn't understand." My nephew had me convinced it was just for tax purposes. I thought about how close I'd come to being on the other side of that sentence. In the quiet moments, I still thought about Dale, about the day he pressed that brass key into my hand. I understood now he wasn't just giving me a way to open a safe. He was giving me a way to hold my ground, even if I had to do it alone. Passing that key to Noah wasn't just about trust. It was about making sure the lesson didn't stop with me. As winter approached again, I stood one evening in the store's doorway, watching Main Street glow with holiday lights. The shelves were full. The cash register balanced, the bell over the door chimed every few minutes with another customer. I thought about how close I'd come to losing it all, not through bad business, but through betrayal. And how instead of letting it take me down, I'd found a way to make it part of my story. Because that's the thing about legacy. It's not just what you leave behind. It's what you protect while you're still here. It's the boundaries you hold, the lessons you pass on, the quiet examples you set without ever needing to raise your voice. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and walked home through the cold, the snow crunching under my boots. Somewhere behind me, the store stood solid against the night, warm and lit from within, still mine, still standing. And I knew that as long as I kept living by the rules I'd fought for, it always would be. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in courtrooms or boardrooms. They happen at the kitchen table, at family dinners, in the quiet moments when someone you love asks you to give up more than you can afford to lose. This story was never just about a hardware store. It was about knowing your own worth and having the courage to protect it, even when the threat comes from people who share your last name. We grow up hearing that family comes first, but the truth is, real family doesn't demand you shrink so they can grow. Real family doesn't turn love into leverage. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop letting people use your care as a weapon. Rachel's choice to safeguard what she and Dale built wasn't an act of spite. It was an act of love for herself, for her legacy, and for the kind of trust that can't be broken by manipulation. Sometimes protecting your peace means setting boundaries you wish you didn't have to set. And yes, it's lonely at first. But as Rachel learned, the quiet that follows isn't emptiness, it's freedom. If this story reminded you of a time you had to stand your ground or taught you something about guarding what matters, I'd like to hear it. Leave a comment below. You never know who might need to read your words today. Tap the like button if Rachel's journey spoke to you, and subscribe if you want more stories that speak to the heart and the human spirit. Whatever you're going through, remember you deserve to feel safe, seen, and free. Until next time, take care of your heart and take care of each other.